Buying your first home, the process can feel overwhelming, confusing, and full of hidden surprises. That's why in today's video, I'm giving you a real step-by-step timeline to buying your first home so that you can avoid stress, wasted time, and potential costly mistakes that home buyers often make. And make sure you stick around until the end because I'm gonna give you some examples of some recent buyers that I worked with in terms of what this looks like in the real world from start to finish, from the time you decide you're going to purchase a home to the time that you get the keys and you can move in. Now, just before I get into it, if you're new here, my name's Andrew Stevens. I've been a realtor in Halifax for over 10 years. And if you want to be educated on the Halifax real estate market, then you're in the right place. Hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. And if you're thinking about making a move in the HRM and you'd like to get in touch with me to help you along the way, you can reach out to me anytime in the Calendly link below. Okay, so this video is your complete guide start to finish. There's going to be 8 steps that I'm going to walk you through. So starting off, step number 1 is why. Why do you want to buy a home? And this is something that is really important and it's often skipped, but I chat about this with all my buyers when I meet them. So what is the reason that you want to buy a home? And there's 5 general questions that you should be asking. First off, the simple one. Why do you want to buy a home? Are you looking for more space? Are you looking for a better location? Are you looking to build some equity? Maybe you want to upsize, maybe you want to downsize, maybe you're looking for an investment property. These are all things that you need to ask yourself before you start the buying process. Number 2, are you ready for a long-term commitment? Let's call it at least 4 years minimum. And yes, I know that recently throughout the pandemic years, especially, the market was kind of taking off and there was a lot of people that owned a home for maybe a year or 2, and maybe they made a lot of money when they turned around and sold it. But we were seeing market increases during that time frame of anywhere between 15 and 25% for a few years in a row. This is an anomaly. If you're looking to buy a home, you should be looking at a long-term commitment, especially if it's your first home, in the realm of about 4 to 5 years. Because if you turn around and sell it after just 12 months, then you're going to be looking at realtor fees, you're going to be looking at potentially penalties to break your mortgage, and there's all kinds of things like that. So you don't want to be going backwards. You should be planning for a long-term move. Number 3, are you financially ready to purchase a home? So this is going to be talked about a little bit more in step 2 when we get onto the pre-approval, but it's not just the ability to purchase it, it's the ability to maintain it, it's the ability to deal with the taxes and the maintenance and the utilities and all these things. So it's not just the mortgage payment. There's a lot more that goes into a home in terms of upkeep, especially if you're buying an older home. So you need to know that you're financially prepared. I would suggest that you have a bit of an emergency fund on hand, maybe 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses if you can salvage that up. And I know that's difficult in today's economy, but that's just sort of the perfect scenario if you're looking to buy your first home. Number 4, what type of home do you want and what type of lifestyle do you want to live? So do you want country living? Do you want city living? Do you want a home? Do you want a semi? Do you want detached? Do you want maybe a condo? It's different for everybody depending on your budget and depending on your lifestyle. So these are things that you might not know right off the bat if you're looking to buy your first home, what specific type of home you want. But that's why it's important to connect with a realtor in step 3 when I get there, because they'll help you kind of narrow things down and get more to the point and help you discover what you like and what you're looking for. And number 5, the last question that I have is, are you ready for the responsibility of home ownership? Not just financially, but are you ready to deal with home ownership? Maybe you're currently in a rental and you don't need to shovel the snow, for example, and all these little maintenance type of things that come with home ownership. It's not always easy breezy. Things break. It's a pain. Sometimes owning a home is a pain in the ass, but the pros certainly outweigh the cons. But these are all things to consider before you should be looking at purchasing a home. And it's important to start off with determining your why, because that's going to create the foundation of moving forward through this home buying process. All right, moving on to step number 2. And this one is get pre-approved. This is extremely important to do this before you start looking at homes for a variety of reasons, but this would be step number 2 for me. Realistically, step number 3 and 2 could kind of be interchangeable, but I like to see people pre-approved before I even meet with them, which is step 3, consulting with a realtor. So first off, if it was up to me, I would very highly suggest going to a mortgage broker, not the big banks. Honestly, the bank is not always your friend. It's just a reality of it. They have very limited products based on what their own branch can get. And if you're going to get a mortgage and you're going to a different financial institution, for example, it just comes out of your bank account the same way that every other payment does. Most payments don't come directly from BMO if you bank with them, or Scotiabank or TD or whoever you bank with. So it's not necessary that you have to have your mortgage from there. I'm not saying the big bank might not be an option for you. What I'm saying is it's better to work with a mortgage broker because they'll help you in terms of determining what is important in your mortgage, what kind of terms you should get, and they have access to way more products than a big bank who only has one specific product or one type of stream in terms of what they're going to offer you. Now you're going to start off by the obvious, asking them what you can be approved for. But that doesn't end there. It's not just as simple as, okay, you're pre-approved to $700,000. You need to ask them what the payment schedule looks like if you purchase a home for $700,000 based on the down payment that you have. So it's not just as easy as saying I'm pre-approved for $700,000, so I could spend, $695 and I can afford it and life is great. Oftentimes when people get pre-approved and they know what those payments look like, they're in shock that the bank will actually give them that much money. Like I said, the bank is not always your best friend. So just because you're pre-approved to $700 does not mean that you should necessarily spend $695,000. You might be way more comfortable in the $550,000 to $600,000 range, for example. And that's why it's important to talk to the mortgage broker to get the kind of payment schedule for the specific price ranges that you're looking in so that you can have a clear understanding of what your budget is going to look like and what your payments are going to look like once we get all the other details from the specific property that you're looking at buying, such as the potential utility costs and the taxes and all those things. A common mistake that I see in my day-to-day is that somebody goes online and gets pre-approved on maybe an online calculator, but they didn't do anything to verify the income and verify the credit and all those things. So this is a huge mistake. You need to get pre-approved up front by giving all your documents to a mortgage broker so they can run it through the process and let you know exactly where you stand. Because if you don't, then you're only risking disappointment in the end when you find that perfect house that you love, and it's going to create much longer timelines when you find a home that you love, which is going to make it a lot more difficult to buy your first home because we're going to be up likely against multiple offer situations if you're in a typical first-time home buyer type of budget. So these are all the reasons that this pre-approval is so important. Step number 3. Connect with a realtor. So somebody who you know, like, and trust. That would be a pretty typical way to find a realtor, or maybe you found them on a YouTube channel like a lot of people have found me on this channel. And if you're looking for help to buy your first home, I would love to have you reach out. I would love to help. But somebody you know, like, and trust, somebody with experience, and somebody who's worked with a lot of first-time home buyers. These are all important pieces of the puzzle when selecting a realtor. And if you're curious as to how to pick a realtor, you can reach out to me anytime and I'll give you some advice on some questions to ask. And I always recommend that you could talk to multiple agents to find the right fit for you. There's about 2,000 agents in Halifax, give or take, all with different ages, backgrounds, experience levels, and so on. And there's a right fit out there for everybody. Maybe it's me, maybe it's somebody else, but I would love to sit down and chat with you to help you through that process. So usually what I would do if somebody reaches out to me looking to buy their first home is that I would have an initial consult. I would sit down with them, maybe over a coffee or a beer. Maybe it's on Zoom, or maybe they come into my office, just depending on where they live and what our schedules are like. But it's pretty chill. It's not stressful or overwhelming. We're just working through the process. So I have kind of a list of questions that I ask people, kind of a discovery session. What are you looking for? What are your needs and wants? Maybe they don't have an idea of what kind of home they want, but by going through this process with me, they end up kind of narrowing it down, and we kind of get to a point where we have a good idea of what we're looking for by the end of this session. And then the next step from there would be for me to create a search for them. Now, I know that a lot of buyers are looking online for their own homes, and that's fine. I always make a search on the back end, and that way we know we're definitely not going to miss anything, because maybe you're busy a certain week and you miss the perfect home that pops up because you just weren't checking your notifications the same way you always do. If you're looking for your own homes, there's two main sites that you would use in Nova Scotia. One is pretty typical that buyers use throughout all of Canada, and that is Realtor.ca. Now, lately, Realtor.ca has made some great improvements to their site. It's a lot more user-friendly and there's a lot more information on there. But another one that a lot of Nova Scotian home buyers will use, and this is specific to Nova Scotia, is Viewpoint. I know a lot of people watching this video probably know what that is. It's a great site. I would suggest it's probably the best site in terms of looking for homes in the province of Nova Scotia. It just seems to have the most kind of data feeds coming from all over, and it has the most information for buyers looking to purchase a home. Now, it's important to note that in pretty much all cases, let's say 99.9% of cases, you as a buyer are not going to pay any money to your buyer's agent here in Nova Scotia to have them represent you throughout the process. This is typically paid through the seller out of the proceeds of the closing on the closing date. And when you sign a buyer contract with your agent, it's going to have a section in there that's telling that you're signing off on them being able to collect the payment from the seller. Now, I'm not saying that's 100% of the time, because that would be false. But I'm not even going to talk about the few kind of cases that you would have to pay this, but it's something that I would talk about with every buyer as we're sitting down having this initial consult. But for the simplicity of this video, I'm not going to talk about it. For example, I've sold over 500 homes in my career in my 10 years. It's 530 something and counting. A lot of these were on the buyer end, and I can tell you that on the seller side or the buyer side, it doesn't matter. Out of those 530 deals, I have never once had a buyer pay directly their agent their commission. So that'll tell you just how rare it is. Not saying it's not possible, but it's very, very rare. All right, now moving on to step number 4. This one is viewing homes. So now you've been pre-approved, you know your why, you know what you're looking for, you've met with your agent, you have everything ready to go, and the next step is viewing some properties. Now, generally speaking, a lot of these homes that you're looking at are going to be MLS listings. So what that means is it's out there in the MLS system. It's online for everybody to see. So in other words, this is what you're looking at on, for example, Realtor.ca or Viewpoint. So first of all, one thing that is very important to know is MLS listings and how they work. So if you're working with a realtor, which by the way, if you're buying your first home is extremely important, then you would have one single point of contact. You have your buyer's agent. You reach out to them, or maybe they reach out to you with a listing and you say you want to go see it, and then you book an appointment. We don't just show up at homes and walk right in. Oftentimes there's people living in those homes. So we book an appointment for a specific window. Usually they're 30, 45, or 60-minute windows, depending on the property. And then we would go together, the buyer's agent and the buyer, to look at this property. So one thing that's important to note with MLS listings is that it doesn't matter what company they're with. We all cooperate together. So for example, I'm with EXIT Realty, but a lot of the homes I show and sell are maybe listed by Royal LePage or Remax or Sutton or Century 21 or any of these other brands. That's okay. We all work together. So just because you're working with an agent from a specific brokerage or brand does not tie you into buying a listing that is also listed by that brand or that brokerage. I just want to clarify that. Now, during these viewings, as a buyer's agent, it is my job to protect you and your best interest. It is my job to show you everything you need to know about that home. So as we're going through, I'm not just trying to sell you this home. It's my job to represent you. And that's why you want your own agent, because they're there to help you and represent your best interests, whereas the listing agent is there to represent the seller and their best interests. So if I'm working for a seller and I'm showing a home that is to a buyer who doesn't have an agent, I'm more so trying to sell the listing, right? I'm trying to sell my client's house. That is why I'm there. Now, if I'm on the buyer side, I'm trying to sell you a house. But if this house isn't the right fit, I'm going to tell you why I think that. So as we're going through these listings, I'm pointing out the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're talking about everything very transparently. I'm pointing out all the flaws that I see. I'm pointing out all the upcoming work or renovations that need to be done, maybe some maintenance items that haven't been taken care of, and so on. So it's pretty thorough. And my whole goal is that if you do like the home, we write an offer, we're hoping that we're not going to find something that's a surprise in the home inspection, because I've already talked to you about the majority of those things. So for example, if the oil tank has to be replaced soon, I'm telling you that. If the hot water tank has to be replaced soon, I'm telling you that. If I'm worried about the condition of the deck or the windows or the roof, I'm telling you that. Same thing with electrical and all these things. So I'm very, very transparent and I'm very educational. It's my job to teach you about what you are potentially interested in buying, and what to look out for in future homes so that we don't run into any issues. Next up, step number 5 is the offer process. So let's say you met with an agent, you're already pre-approved, you've been looking at some homes for maybe a few weeks or a month now, and now you found the home that you want to write an offer on. So you want to buy this home. How does the offer process work? Well, it really depends on the situation, but overall, there's a few different kind of strategies that home sellers use. One would be they list a little bit on the low side and they make it a really attractive price point. So for example, let's say a home is worth somewhere in the realm of $525 to $550. Maybe they list it at $499. Usually in this case, they would be holding offers to a specific timeline. And then let's say they list on a Thursday, they're going to take all offers on the following Monday or Tuesday, and there's likely to be multiple offers. So in that point, we would write an offer for the specific deadline, and that is when the sellers would review this offer with their agent. There's some other examples that maybe this home is listed not as aggressively. Maybe it's been on the market for a little bit longer and it's listed at $549.9, and then they're just taking offers as they come in, and maybe they want them to be left open for a response for maybe 24 hours. Those would be kind of the two typical ways that we offer on properties. Now, it's important to know that especially if you're looking in price ranges that are pretty competitive, you want to give the seller as much of what they want as possible. So in other words, you want to match up and make your offer as attractive looking as possible to the seller. So if they want to close, let's say April 1st, and it's only January 15th, it would be in your best interest to line that closing up to be as close to April 1st as possible. Because if you're going in there and you're saying, well, I want a quick closing, I want to close by February 15th, that might be something that shoots you in the foot right away. So you want to match things up as much as you can for what the seller is looking for. Now, obviously, price plays a huge factor in this. Let's say you're willing to pay $50,000 extra if they get out of the house in 30 days, while maybe they do want to move a little earlier in order to get a little bit extra money from you. So money talks, but at the end of the day, there's much more that goes into an offer than just that. So the way these offers are worded is you, the buyer, are offering to buy the home from whoever the seller is. You're going to give them a deposit, and we're going to get into conditions in a few seconds, but you're going to give them a deposit. You're going to offer a specific price point. You're going to give a certain timeline to meet your buyer conditions, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And you're going to give them a specific closing day, and you're going to talk about what you want to be included in the home sale. So, are the window coverings included? Are the appliances included? All of these types of things. And these are very standard documents that are basically fill in the blank and check boxes for your realtor to fill out for you. So we, as your buyer's agent, take care of all the paperwork for you, which is pretty obvious, but I just wanted to point that out. So that brings us to step number 6, which is due diligence. So this is the period between the time when you get an accepted offer and the home is actually officially sold. So this is the time when you're going to meet your conditions. Generally speaking, you're going to have somewhere in the realm of 5 to 10 business days to complete this. I always suggest that the quicker we can get through this, the better, which again is a huge reason why it's important to be pre-approved, because that will have a huge impact on how quick you can get your financing approval. Because if you can turn this around in 5 business days, it's going to give you an upper hand on most other buyers who are offering with 7 to 10 business days, just as an example. So what conditions should you have in your offer? Well, the standard ones would be you're going to give a deposit, which just goes towards your closing costs at the end of the transaction. You're going to have a condition in there for financing. You're going to have a condition in there for inspections, which would be like a home inspection or a septic inspection or a sewer line inspection or a well inspection if you're buying something on well and septic that's a little bit further outside of the city. You're also going to have a clause in there for insurance confirmation, just knowing that you can get insurance on the property. And you're going to have a condition in there for lawyer review, so they can review the title and they can review the agreement itself and all of the wording. These are all pretty standard conditions, and the two real important ones that we're going to be going through are financing and inspection. You definitely want to have inspection on your property. There would only be a few very rare cases that I would suggest not doing this, and obviously you need a financing approval to purchase the property unless you're paying cash, which if you're buying your first home is probably a very, very rare scenario. Now, if during this due diligence period you run into an issue, then you would have a few different options. So let's say, for example, during the inspection, the inspector goes up into the attic and we thought the roof was not looking too bad from the outside, but it's leaking everywhere on the inside. Let's just use this as an example. So it's something that wasn't super obvious to us when we were reviewing the property, and now we have a problem. Let's say the property needs a new roof and it's going to cost $10,000 to do so. There's a few different options. We could just move ahead and firm up the deal and you take that into account on the back end. A lot of that would depend on how good of a deal did you get on the home? How much do you definitely not want to miss out on this home, and so on. You could also renegotiate a few different ways. Maybe the seller, depending on the situation, would be willing to put a new roof on the property before closing. Or maybe they want nothing to do with it. Every situation is a little bit different. If they want nothing to do with it, will they give you a credit on closing, or will they take some money off to account for the roof and then you could do it when you move in? So there's all kinds of things like this. And if you cannot come to an agreement during that negotiation process, then you are at liberty to terminate the deal and you can move on and go find another home. So these are all different options. They all play out differently, but it's something I want to talk about is if you have an issue, you are at liberty to terminate this agreement of purchase and sale. So same thing, if you don't get financing, then you're at liberty to terminate the purchase and sale agreement. And if you do so, then your deposit will be coming back to you without penalty or interest if you've already submitted the deposit before we get to the end of that condition period. So this brings us to step 7, which is a firm deal or a sold deal. It just kind of depends on who you're talking to. In the real estate side of things, we always say it's firm. And then on the public side, it often says sold. So that is the point when you've met conditions, the home is sold, and now you're just waiting for the closing date. So maybe you met conditions in the middle of February and then it closes at the end of March. Now there's a few things that you should be doing in the meantime. Obviously, you want to be planning your move. You want to be forwarding your mail. You want to be setting up all your utility accounts for the closing date. And that way everything's ready to go when you get there. So you're not walking into a house that has no power, or you want to set up your oil delivery and your water account, all these different things, depending on what you're buying and what accounts are applicable to you. And lastly, now we are at step number 8, and this is the most exciting part. This is closing day. So on closing day, you and your realtor are going to go usually first thing in the morning to do a pre-closing walkthrough. Now there's a few reasons we do this, but simply put, we do this to make sure the property is the way that it should be before you are telling your lawyer that you are ready to close the transaction. So is everything that's in the house there that is supposed to be there on closing, like everything we have in the agreement? So maybe you have the appliances are included and the bathroom mirrors and the garage door openers, and the house is going to be professionally cleaned before closing. Maybe they had some work to do prior to closing that you negotiated after the inspection. So we're just making sure that everything that's supposed to be there is there. Everything that's supposed to be gone is gone. The property is clean and ready to be closed. Now, sometimes we run into issues where maybe there's some garbage left behind. For example, in those cases, maybe we negotiate a credit for you to get some money for junk removal, or maybe in some cases, the sellers come back right after the closing walkthrough and clear it out themselves, and we verify that before we close. But once everything is satisfied, then from that point, you're just telling your lawyer that you're good to close. And once they transfer the money, then the house is officially yours and you are now a homeowner. So it's important to note that I, as a realtor, cannot release keys right away at that walkthrough. So you probably shouldn't show up with the moving truck that morning. And oftentimes, homes do not close until early afternoon, or it could be very late in the day. Oftentimes, this is the case because your lawyer often doesn't have the mortgage funds from your lender until later in the day. So maybe we did the walkthrough on a Thursday morning and we're good to close and we tell your lawyer right away. But maybe if your lender is TD, for example, or First National or somebody like that, maybe the funds don't come from them to your lawyer until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we don't close officially until that money is moved from your lawyer's account to the seller's lawyer's account. So really, you need to be prepared that your home is potentially not going to close until late afternoon, maybe as late as 4:59 p.m. Or if we're really unlucky, maybe it waits till the next day. But usually, generally speaking, it'll close that day, usually in the afternoon at some point. And from that point, then the keys can be released and then it is yours to move in and do whatever you want to do. So generally speaking, if you're looking to set up some appointments on closing day, I would wait until the following day. Things like internet hookup, things like your movers, all these types of things, it's probably best to wait until the following day to do so. So that's your basic, very broken down, very, kind of quick 8-step process to buying a home. Now, one of the questions I get a lot is how long does the home buying process take? And there are a ton of things that could determine how long this is going to take. So for example, how sure are you of what you want? How much do you know what you want? How good is your budget based on what you're looking for? How competitive is the price point that you're looking in? How motivated are you? Are you ready to move like right away? Do you have a lease that's coming up for renewal and you don't want to renew it? So there's all kinds of things like this. Or maybe what you're looking for is difficult to find. Maybe you're somebody who's not looking for their first home. Maybe you're looking for your second home and it's going to be the forever home and you need a very specific neighborhood and type of home, type of size, all these things. It really depends on how open you are, what your criteria is, and what your motivation is. But here's 3 real-life examples of 3 buyers I've worked with in the last 6 months, just to give you an idea of what this could look like. So I had a client that I met in the middle of October. I met them on a Wednesday night out for a beer to chat about the home buying process. We hit it off and they wanted to start looking at homes right away. We started looking at homes that Friday. So I met them on Wednesday, showed them homes on Friday, showed them a few more the following Tuesday, same thing with the following Friday, and then so 2.5 weeks after I met them on a Friday, we got an accepted offer on a property that they loved in Dartmouth. Shout out to you guys. If you're watching, you might be watching this video. So from that point, then they had about a week to meet their conditions and we closed about a month later. The whole process from start to finish took about 5 weeks. I would suggest that this is pretty quick. This is usually kind of the quickest that I would see that happen, but it just depends. Sometimes people find their home really quickly, and it really depends on how picky they are and what they're looking for and what their budget is. My second example, I met this buyer at a home that I had listed. They did not have a realtor, so I showed them this home. It wasn't quite the one for them, but we just got talking and they decided they wanted to work with me going forward. I showed this buyer a property or two every kind of week or a couple times a week for the following 3 or 4 weeks. Then we found a property that they loved and we wrote an offer and we won in a bidding war. Then we had about a week to meet conditions. The whole process from start to finish took about 8 to 10 weeks, give or take. Again, this is pretty quick, and honestly, they were very motivated, and it probably would have been quicker if they could find a home that worked for them. They had a very specific thing they were looking for, and it just took some time and a slow time a year to get the right listing to pop up that met all the boxes for them. And my third example, this is a buyer who was a young couple looking for their first home, a very competitive price point, kind of in the up to $450,000 range. And in HRM right now, it's a very difficult price range. I would say with this particular buyer, it took about 6 to 7 months from the time we first met to buy their home. I was probably out with them once a week or every other week, just showing a home or two. And there were a few times that we found homes that they loved and they wrote offers on, and we just weren't lucky enough to win in a multiple offer situation. So like I said, it really depends on the price point that you're looking in. For these guys, it took about 6 to 7 months, and that included losing in multiple offer situations a couple times. But on the third time, we secured the home that they loved, and then it closed a month later, and it took about 6 or 7 months from start to finish. I would say these guys weren't quite as motivated as some of the other buyers I've worked with recently. They had a very good rental situation. They were month to month, so they weren't really worried about the timeline. They had a very cheap rent, so every month that went by, they kind of saved up a little bit more money in their emergency fund. So it was a fine situation for them. They weren't in a rush, and things worked out. It took about 6 to 7 months. There's really no right or wrong how many homes you need to look at, how long it's going to take. It really depends on your situation, and that's something that we would discuss based on our initial consult when you contact me in the first place, is what you're looking for, what your budget is, and what your motivation is, and what that timeline should look like or could like or might look like, because those are all very different things. So again, like I said, if you're looking to buy your first home anywhere throughout the HRM or in Nova Scotia, I would love to chat with you and help you through that process. And you can book a meeting with me in the Calendly link below at any time, at a time when it's convenient for you. And if you got any value from this video, all I ask is that you hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. And that'll make sure that you don't miss any of my future content, but that'll also help push this out to more people like you who may be interested in learning more about the Halifax and Nova Scotia real estate markets. And until next time, don't worry about buying your first home. It's not as stressful and daunting as you may think, but you need to work with the proper people to get good guidance to help you through that process. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support, and have a great day.